Hello, this is Dr. Cruz. I welcome you to World Cultural Geography. This semester, we're going to examine the forces that affect our cultural landscape. Are you an immigrant or a native Washingtonian? Perhaps you have traveled the world or you have never left the DMV. We are all increasingly connected to other parts of the world, whether we are conscious of it or not. How have we become so interglobally connected? Is the increasing globalization of the world threatening our local cultural diversity? How does the place people live impact their lives and life's chances? This course is an invitation to studying cultural geography, that is, the study of place and location and the relationship between people and places. Geographic literacy is necessary for well informed citizens in today's complex and interrelated world. Intelligent citizens must understand the geographic interplay between humans and their environment that underpins so many social, political, physical, economic, and cultural realities. When broken down, the word geography means to describe the earth, as geo, the prefix, derives from the Greek prefix geo, which means earth, and graph means to write about something. So geography means to study the earth. Human geography is the study of the relationships between people and places and spaces in which they live. And culture is the body of customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits that together constitute a group's distinct tradition. Culture includes things that we care about and take care of. So think about cultural geography as it relates to your local cultural landscape. Our culture includes our media, our religion, our clothing, our food, our housing, our agriculture, and our language. Think about the items that make up your cultural landscape and which ones are important to you. Today's objectives are to understand the objectives of the course, to define cultural geography, to explain geographic inquiry, and introduce the tools of geography. You will be tested on your knowledge of these geographic areas during the semester. And finally, the second step of geographic inquiry is to acquire geographic information. And when I say acquire geographic information, that might also be interpreted as to get data so you can answer your questions. It's important that you learn how to obtain reliable and credible information. You will learn how to ask questions and gather information to establish the credibility of information found on the internet and elsewhere. So let's get into the geographic inquiry portion of this lecture. Geography is the study of where things are or phenomena are found in the world and the reasons for the locations. Human geographers ask, where are people and activities found on Earth? Why are they found there? And why does that matter? Every day as you move through space, as you work, study, and live. You perform geographic actions, make geographic observations, and make geographic decisions as you move through space. When you make these decisions, you use geographic inquiry. Geographic inquiry is similar to other research methods, such as the scientific method. The difference is that geographic inquiry is concerned with space. Geographers are concerned with how things are distributed over space. So, geographic inquiry, we start by asking geographic questions. We then acquire geographic resources or get data. We explore the geographic data. We analyze that information. And eventually, we use that information to act. So let's think about the first step, asking geographic questions. The first step of geographic inquiry is to ask a question. Think about questions that you have, think about phenomenon that you have observed and ask a spatial question. So, some questions that you might ask. If you are an administration of justice major, what is the pattern to when and where crime is occurring? If you're a social work or education major, which ward in the district houses the most foster children? Where do the majority of children use free lunch programs? Where do these things occur and why do they matter? On a global level or on a more global level, where is the world's population distribution? Which states have the most Baptists? And we will explore as a class, where were UDC Firebirds born and where do UDC Firebirds live? Some of the questions that I ask myself as I move through space every day, as I travel to the University of the District of Columbia, which route will get me there the fastest? How can I stop at Starbucks without altering my route? Which routes will have the fewest cars? What time should I leave to run into the least amount of traffic? These are some of the geographic questions that I ask every day. What geographic questions do you ask? So then we go about to collecting our data, whether it's on a formal or informal basis. So when I'm in my car driving to work, the action is more informal. But in some cases, we use formal methods to collect data. As a nation, we gather data from censuses, from satellites, from surveys, and from observations. You may yourself decide you're going to conduct a survey. So these are some of the methods we use to collect geographic data. And then we explore geographic data through a wide variety of geographic tools, including maps, tables, charts, graphs, and images. The image that you see on the right is called a word map. And in this case, somebody could have interpreted a paragraph, and the words that were used most in the paragraph are represented in the largest font sizes here. So the words human geography, geography, physical environment, and so forth were used the most. So you can use this kind of map, a word map, to if you wanted to review a document or review survey responses. So for example, if you surveyed 100 people and asked them a question about their greatest fear, for example, the fear that was mentioned the most times would appear in a larger text than the other responses. General maps that show a variety of features such as cities, boundaries, mountains, rivers, and roads are called reference maps. This reference map shows one author's perceptions of geographic regions. So he uses the regions called North America, Middle America, and South America, for example. When you use Google Maps to locate a place, you are using Google Maps as a reference map. For those of us who are older and use paper maps, such as those that you got from AAA, those maps were generally a type of a reference maps. Another kind of maps, or a group of maps, are called thematic maps. So we're going to talk about thematic maps for a little bit. One type of a thematic map is an isoline map. Generally, thematic maps show a particular phenomenon such as race, temperature, population, religious affiliation, and many more. This thematic map shows the temperature. And an isoline map could also be used to show something like the amount of rainfall or elevation. So again, the isoline map is, the word isoline derives from the Greek prefix iso, which means equal. So an isoline must be a line joining points of equal or almost equal value. In this map, you see that the bands with a color, which you could use to interpret those as your lines, represent areas of similar color. So in this map, the negative temperatures are shown in your darkest purple or magenta colors, Temperatures in the 60s are represented in the yellow colors, and the temperatures in the 70s are represented in orange. There are bands of these temperatures across the US, and you can see the bands of color, which generally show you what the range of temperatures are on a given day. The map shown in this slide is called a choropleth map. A choropleth map is a type of thematic map. In a choropleth map, the geographic units, in this case counties, are shaded or patterned according to the measurement of a particular characteristic. So this map is showing population density in the United States, which is measured by people per square mile. The counties with the most people square mile are shaded in dark blue, and the counties where the fewest people per square mile are shaded in yellow. So you can look at a choropleth map and quickly identify the counties with the most people and the counties with the fewest people, or with the fewest people per square mile. So as you look at this map, do you live in an area with high, medium, or low population density? That's the geographic question. This is a second choropleth map, which shows the geographic unit called census tracts. You can see that in the key on the lower left part of the screen. A census tract is a unit specifically used by the U.S. Census Bureau. But this map shows the level of race and ethnic diversity in the District of Columbia. The most diverse tracts are shaded with the dark brown or brownish red color. The least diverse tracts are shaded in yellow. So where would you travel in DC to find the areas that are the least ethnically diverse? This is another type of thematic map called a proportional symbol map. Proportional symbol maps use scale the size of the symbol, usually a circle or a square, proportionally to the data found at that location. So in this proportional symbol map, it shows the number of Walmarts per state. And if a state has 100 or more Walmarts that have the biggest circle, the states with only one Walmart have the smallest circle. So you can quickly look at this map and determine which states have the most Walmarts and which states have the least Walmarts. So which states contained 100 or more Walmart stores in 2009? Well, I quickly look at this map and see that at least 3 of those places are California, Texas, and Florida. After the geographic information is organized into a map, graph, or other artifact, you will need to display or analyze the displayed information by identifying patterns, concentrations, and frequency. You would write up the analysis for the report that would be prepared to share with a specific audience. During this class, we will practice gathering, reviewing information, looking at maps, and learning how to write up the responses. And finally, you would share your results so that geographic information could be acted upon. For example, if you showed the level of smog was greater at certain times of the day, one of the things that you probably would want to do is propose strategies to reduce unhealthy smog levels in your area. And so you would present the information and determine possible solutions to the smog problem in your community. What I want us to do right now is to have an example of a real-world example of geographic inquiry. Our U.S. Constitution in Article 1, Section 2 requires that the U.S. government respond to this question every 10 years. What is the population of the U.S. and where do U.S. residents live? That is in our Constitution so that we can determine how many representatives get applied to each state, and we adjust this number every 10 years. The Census Bureau is charged with responding to this question by conducting a census to get information. The Census Bureau sends a questionnaire to each household, asking each household to supply the information on who lives there, what their age, race, ethnicity is. The census organizes this information into reports, maps, graphs, etc. And then the Census Bureau analyzes this information to show patterns of population distribution and change, race and ethnic distribution, age distribution, but more importantly, also it gives numbers of who lives where in the United States by various geographic units, including states, counties, and census tracts. The Census Bureau reports to the President and Congress answering the question, where do people live, so that the nation's congressional districts can be redrawn. Now, the census data is used for lots of other things, but the Constitution requires that this information be asked to redraw the congressional districts. So here is one of the artifacts that comes from the census itself. This is a map. It's called a dot map. And each dot in this map represents 1,000 people. So after the 2010 census was taken, this dot map was created to show the distribution of the population in the United States and Puerto Rico. So just quickly, if you asked a question, well, which in the United States, where did the most people live? You could answer this in a lot of ways. One is, well, it appears that most of the people live on the eastern half of the country. There are concentrations of people in the northeast region between Washington and Boston. There are also concentrations of people in other metropolitan areas such as Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas, and on the West Coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and the Seattle metropolitan area. And in the middle of the country, you see places where there are not large concentrations of people. Well, which geographic features are in those regions that prevent people from living there? Well, some of those parts of the countries include mountains or deserts. And so these are things that would impact the distribution of the United States population. And finally, the Census Bureau director also reports the information to Congress and the President and to the nation. And this is the Census Bureau Director Robert Groves announcing the results for the 2010 U.S. Census in December of 2010 at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And you can see that the Census Bureau Director used a map to display his information. Over the next 16 weeks, we will examine the forces and phenomena that impact our cultural landscape. As you prepare to learn, think about your cultural landscape or the elements and cultural characteristics of your local or global region that make it distinct. In the pictures above or images above, you can see my immediate neighborhood, which is pictured above in the images with houses. My immediate cultural landscape is impacted by the housing styles of the 1970s. This housing style was very typical for Maryland suburbs in the 1970s. But as I walk further through my neighborhood, I can find housing that was impacted by the cultural housing norms of the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1980s, and 1990s. And in my small neighborhood, these areas are very distinct. As I move out of my neighborhood, there was a wealth of evidence that shows the changing ethnic composition of my neighborhood from almost 100% white in the 1960s and the 1970s to having more ethnic diversity today. You can see the mass schedule for St. Mark's Catholic Church, which is 1 mile away from my home, where a good selection of services are conducted in Spanish. I have noted this change over the last 30 years as I have walked through the community and noticed who is attending Mass at St. Mark's. I move a few miles further into the commercial district, and I can see more evidence that the landscape has been influenced by the force of international migration from Latin America. I can see that the Value Dollar Store has a lot of information posted in Spanish, and the increasing number of stores that are owned that definitely come from the Latino community, Casablanca Bakery, Senor Chicken, and many, many other features in my neighborhood that shows the changes in my cultural landscape. As you walk and drive through your community, put on your cultural geography hat and think about the forces that are impacting your cultural landscape.